The mining station on Kepler 442b had been silent for 3 months. Captain Sarah Chen stared at the dead communication array, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid control room. The fusion reactor had failed 2 weeks ago, and emergency power was running low. Outside the reinforced windows, the alien landscape stretched endlessly under a pale orange sun. "Still nothing from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across the backup communication console. "The quantum relay is completely fried. We're truly on our own out here." Sarah nodded grimly. The mining expedition to Kepler 442b was supposed to last 6 months, extracting rare elements for humanity's expanding fleet. Instead, they had been here for 18 months after their transport ship suffered critical engine failure during departure. The rescue mission that was promised had never arrived. "How many are we down to now?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. 47, Webb replied quietly. "We lost Jenkins and Rodriguez last week to the lung infection. Dr. Martinez says the medical supplies won't last much longer." The mining station housed what remained of the original crew of 200. Disease, accidents, and the harsh alien environment had taken their toll. The survivors had grown closer, forming an unbreakable bond forged in shared hardship. They had learned to adapt, to survive, to thrive even in impossible conditions. Sarah walked to the observation deck, where she could see the mining crews working in the distance. Even with limited equipment and failing machinery, they had managed to extract enough resources to keep the station running. Human ingenuity and determination had turned a death sentence into a fight for survival. The planet itself was beautiful in its own harsh way. Crystalline formations jutted from the surface like frozen lightning, and the thin atmosphere created spectacular aurora displays during the long nights. Strange rock formations suggested ancient geological activity, and their surveys had revealed vast underground water reserves. "Captain," called out Dr. Elena Martinez from the medical bay, "you need to see this." Sarah made her way through the cramped corridors to the medical facility. Dr. Martinez stood before a large display, showing atmospheric readings and biological scans. "I've been analyzing the air samples from the lower caverns," Martinez explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "There's something down there. Microscopic organisms, but they're not native to this planet." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, leaning closer to examine the data. "These organisms show clear signs of artificial genetic modification. Someone or something has been terraforming parts of this planet's underground ecosystem. The question is who and why." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing heating system. They had assumed Kepler 442b was uninhabited, just another resource-rich world waiting to be exploited. The possibility of alien life had been considered but dismissed after initial surveys showed no signs of civilization. "How long have these organisms been down there?" Sarah asked. "Based on their genetic drift patterns, I'd estimate several thousand years. But here's the strange part, they're still active. Whatever put them there might still be around." Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as Webb's voice echoed through the communication system. "All hands to stations. We have multiple unknown contacts approaching from the outer system. This is not a drill." Sarah and Martinez rushed back to the control room, where chaos had erupted. The main display showed dozens of objects moving through space toward their position. The objects were clearly artificial, their sleek designs unlike anything in human space. "They appeared out of nowhere," Webb reported, his face pale. "Our sensors didn't detect any jump signatures or engine emissions. They just materialized in the outer system and started heading our way." Sarah studied the approaching vessels. They moved with purpose, maintaining perfect formation as they closed the distance to Kepler 442b. Their technology was obviously advanced, possibly centuries ahead of human capabilities. "Time to intercept?" she asked. "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours, Webb replied. "Captain, our defensive systems are offline. If they're hostile, we don't stand a chance." Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing fear mixed with determination in their faces. These were the survivors, the ones who had refused to give up when everything seemed hopeless. They had carved out a life on this alien world through sheer force of will. "Send a message on all frequencies," Sarah ordered. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Mining Expedition. We are stranded civilians with no hostile intent. We request peaceful contact." The next few hours passed in tense silence. The alien ships continued their approach, ignoring all attempts at communication. Sarah had the non-essential personnel move to the deepest parts of the mining complex, where they might have a chance of survival if the worst happened. As the alien fleet entered orbit around Kepler 442b, Sarah finally got her first clear look at the vessels. They were magnificent. Organic curves blended with geometric precision, creating ships that looked more grown than built. Energy readings from their hulls suggested power sources beyond human understanding. "Captain," Webb called out suddenly, "I'm getting something. It's not audio, but there's definitely a signal being directed at us." The main display flickered, then cleared to show an image that made everyone in the control room gasp. The being on the screen was clearly alien but somehow familiar. Its features were elegant and symmetrical, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds rather than through their ears. "Humans of Earth," the being said, its mental voice carrying undertones of surprise and what might have been approval. "We did not expect to find your species here. Your presence is most interesting." Sarah stepped forward, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We are stranded here. Our ship was damaged and we've been waiting for rescue. We mean no harm to you or your world." The alien's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. "Our world? Young human, this is not our world. We are here because of you. Your species has accomplished something remarkable. Something we have been watching with great interest." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, confusion evident in her voice. "You have taken a dead world and brought it to life through your determination and refusal to surrender. The terraforming organisms our ancestors left here eons ago have responded to your presence. They were designed to recognize and assist species with the potential for greatness. You have proven yourselves worthy." The alien's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the humans thought they knew about their situation. Captain Sarah Chen felt her mind racing as she tried to process the implications. The microscopic organisms Dr. Martinez had discovered weren't just remnants of ancient terraforming. They were some kind of test. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean we've proven ourselves worthy?" The alien being leaned forward slightly, its large eyes reflecting something that might have been respect. "My name is Keeper Valeth of the Eternal Archive. We are the Zephyrians, guardians of knowledge and observers of emerging civilizations. For millennia, we have watched species rise and fall across the galaxy. Most fail when faced with true adversity." Lieutenant Webb moved closer to Sarah, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm before he remembered their weapons were useless against such advanced technology. "What kind of test?" he demanded. Keeper Valeth's attention shifted to Webb, and the human felt a gentle pressure in his mind, not invasive, but reassuring. "The test of abandonment. When a species believes itself truly alone, when all hope seems lost, that is when their true nature reveals itself. Some turn to violence against each other. Others simply give up and wait for death. But humans do something extraordinary." Dr. Martinez stepped forward from where she had been monitoring the conversation from the medical bay doorway. "You're saying you've been watching us this entire time? That our isolation was deliberate?" "Not deliberately created by us," Valeth clarified. "Your ship's malfunction was genuine, as was your government's inability to mount a rescue mission. We simply observed what happened next. And what we witnessed was remarkable." The keeper gestured, and the main display shifted to show footage of the human colony over the past 18 months. Sarah watched in amazement as scenes played out showing their survival efforts, their innovations, their refusal to give up even when death seemed certain. "Look at what you have accomplished," Valeth continued. "You turned a failing mining operation into a thriving settlement. You created new technologies from salvaged parts. You established sustainable food production in underground hydroponic gardens. Most importantly, you maintained your humanity in the face of impossible odds." The footage showed crew members sharing their meager rations, carrying wounded comrades to safety, working together on repairs despite exhaustion and despair. Sarah remembered each moment, but seeing it from this perspective made her realize the magnitude of what they had achieved. "Your species has a gift," Valeth explained. "When faced with extinction, humans don't just survive, they adapt and grow stronger. The terraforming organisms we left here were programmed to respond to species that demonstrate this quality. They have been slowly improving your air quality, your soil composition, and even your water supply. Sarah thought back to the gradual improvements they had noticed over the months. The air had become easier to breathe in the lower caverns. The water from the underground springs had grown cleaner and more refreshing. They had attributed these changes to their own filtration systems, but now she realized the truth. Why? She asked. Why test us? Why help us? Baelith's expression grew serious, and the mental undertones of the conversation shifted to convey urgency. Because the galaxy faces a threat that requires the cooperation of all worthy species. For the past century, we have been monitoring the approach of what we call the Void Swarm, a mechanical intelligence that consumes entire star systems to fuel its expansion. The display changed to show star charts with vast, dark areas spreading across galactic arms. Red markers indicated systems that had gone dark, their suns extinguished and planets stripped bare. The swarm has already consumed 17% of our galaxy, Baelith continued. Every species we have encountered has either been consumed or has fled to the galaxy's outer rim. We had begun to lose hope that any race could stand against this threat. Lieutenant Webb studied the star charts with a tactical eye. How long until they reach human space? At their current rate of expansion, approximately 50 of your years, Baelith replied. But they are accelerating as they consume more resources. That timeline could shrink to 30 years or less. Dr. Martinez raised a crucial question. If you're so advanced, why haven't you stopped them yourselves? Baelith's response carried undertones of ancient sadness. We tried. Our civilization reached its peak 3 million years ago. We have powerful technology and vast knowledge, but we lack something essential that humans possess in abundance. What's that? Sarah asked. The willingness to fight against impossible odds. The refusal to accept defeat. The ability to find solutions where none should exist. Baelith paused, seeming to gather thoughts. We have become too focused on preservation and observation. When faced with the swarm's inexorable advance, we chose retreat and defensive strategies. We have been running for over 1,000 years. The control room fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. Sarah found herself thinking about her crew, about the 47 survivors who had turned a death sentence into a new life. She thought about human history, about the countless times her species had faced extinction and somehow found a way forward. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah asked carefully. An alliance, Baelith replied. We offer our technology, our knowledge, our manufacturing capabilities. In return, humans provide what we lack, the courage to stand and fight, the ingenuity to find new solutions, the determination to never surrender. Webb stepped forward, his military background evident in his posture. You want us to help you fight this swarm? Not just fight, Baelith corrected. We want to learn from you. Your species has something we lost long ago, the ability to see opportunity in disaster, to create strength from weakness. The organisms here have been studying your biological and psychological responses to stress. The data suggests that humans might be the key to stopping the swarm permanently. Dr. Martinez was already thinking like a scientist. What kind of timeline are we looking at for this alliance? And what about our people back on Earth? Earth will be informed of your survival and your new circumstances, Baelith assured her. As for timeline, that depends on how quickly humans can adapt to new technologies and coordinate a galaxy-wide defense effort. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same mix of excitement and apprehension she felt herself. They had survived 18 months of isolation and hardship. Now they were being asked to help save the entire galaxy. There's something else, Baelith added, and the mental tone suggested this was particularly important. The test on this world was not just about survival. It was about cooperation. Despite resource scarcity and mounting pressure, your people never turned against each other. You shared, you sacrificed, you supported one another. This quality will be essential in the battles to come. The keeper gestured again, and new images appeared on the display. Vast construction yards in space, fleets of ships being built, other alien species working alongside humans in the fight against the swarm. This is not just about human survival, Baelith concluded. This is about proving that life, consciousness, and hope can triumph over mechanical destruction. Will you help us turn the tide? Captain Sarah Chen looked at the faces of her crew gathered in the control room. These were people who had already proven they could face the impossible and emerge stronger. The weight of Keeper Baelith's offer hung heavy in the recycled air of the mining station. We need time to discuss this among ourselves, Sarah said finally. This decision affects not just us but our entire species. Baelith nodded, understanding flickering in those ancient eyes. Of course. We will establish an orbital station and begin preliminary preparations. Take all the time you need, but remember, every day of delay brings the swarm closer to inhabited systems. The alien transmission ended, leaving the humans alone with a decision that could reshape the future of the galaxy. Sarah called for an immediate assembly of all surviving crew members in the station's main hall. 47 faces looked up at her as she stood before them. Engineers, miners, scientists, medical personnel, security officers, they had all become something more during their time on Kepler 442b. They had become family. "I'm sure you've all heard the communications by now," Sarah began. "We've been presented with an opportunity that none of us could have imagined when we first arrived here." Dr. Martinez raised her hand. "Captain, I've been thinking about the biological data they mentioned. If these Zephyrians have been studying our responses to stress and isolation, they might have learned something about human psychology that even we don't fully understand." Chief Engineer Rodriguez, one of the few original department heads still alive, stood up slowly. "With respect, Captain, we're talking about technology that's thousands of years ahead of anything we have. How do we know this isn't some elaborate form of alien manipulation?" His question sparked a heated discussion among the crew. Some argued that they had nothing left to lose, while others worried about becoming pawns in a conflict they didn't fully understand. Security Chief Thompson pointed out that they were already stranded with no hope of rescue from Earth. "Look around you," Thompson said, gesturing to the improvised equipment that kept their station running. "We've been making impossible decisions for 18 months. We've turned mining equipment into life support systems, created medicine from mineral compounds, and built a community where there should have been only death. If that's not preparation for fighting impossible odds, I don't know what is." Young technician Lisa Park, barely 25 and one of the newest crew members before they became stranded, spoke up with a voice full of conviction. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about humanity's darkest hours. World wars, natural disasters, pandemics. Every time people said the end had come. But humans always found a way forward. Maybe this is just the biggest challenge yet." The discussion continued for hours. Some crew members worried about their families back on Earth, while others pointed out that those families would be doomed anyway if the void swarm reached human space. The debate revealed deep divisions but also profound unity. Whatever they decided, they would decide together. Dr. Martinez presented scientific arguments about the potential for technological advancement. "Think about what we could learn from an alliance like this. Medical technology that could eliminate disease, energy systems that could power entire worlds, manufacturing capabilities that could build fleets in months instead of decades." Lieutenant Webb approached the discussion from a military perspective. "The strategic implications are staggering. If we can somehow stop this swarm, we're not just saving humanity, we're saving every intelligent species in the galaxy. That's a responsibility I'm not sure we have the right to refuse." But it was maintenance worker Frank Kowalski who finally cut through all the arguments with simple, direct words. "I've got kids back on Earth, twin boys, 7 years old. When I left for this mission, I promised them I'd come home with stories about the stars. Well, now I've got the biggest story of all time. The question is whether I want to tell them how their father helped save the galaxy, or how he was too scared to try." The room fell silent. Sarah realized that Kowalski had identified the heart of their dilemma. Fear was natural, but regret would be unbearable. "There's another factor to consider," Sarah said slowly. "The Zephyrians chose to test us. They could have made contact at any time during the past 18 months, but they waited. They wanted to see who we really are when everything is stripped away. We passed that test by working together, by refusing to give up, by taking care of each other even when resources were scarce." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "They're not asking us to become something we're not. They're asking us to be more of what we already are. The question is whether we're brave enough to take that step." The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Every single crew member agreed to accept the alliance with the Zephyrians. But they demanded conditions. Earth must be contacted and informed of the situation, families must be protected, and humans must maintain autonomy in any joint operations. When Sarah transmitted their decision to keep her Valeth, the response was immediate and filled with what could only be described as joy. "Your conditions are not only acceptable but expected," Valeth replied. "A species that would abandon their principles for convenience would be useless against the swarm. Your Insistence on protecting your own people while fighting for others confirms that we chose correctly. Within hours, the sky above Kepler 442b filled with activity. Zephyrian construction ships materialized in orbit, beginning work on what Valeth called a transition facility. The structure would serve as a combination embassy, training center, and technology transfer station. Dr. Martinez was among the first to board a Zephyrian transport, her eyes wide with wonder as she experienced technology that seemed more like magic. The ship's interior was organic in design, with walls that seemed to pulse gently with life. The artificial gravity was perfect, and the air tasted cleaner than anything she had breathed since leaving Earth. Your medical knowledge is quite advanced for such a young species, commented Zephyrian scientist Healer Ziara as they toured the ship's medical facilities. But you still think in terms of treating symptoms rather than preventing problems at the genetic level. Martinez found herself in discussions that challenged everything she thought she knew about biology and medicine. The Zephyrians didn't just cure diseases, they prevented them from ever existing. Their technology could literally rewrite genetic code to eliminate hereditary problems before they manifested. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Rodriguez worked with Zephyrian technicians to understand their manufacturing processes. What he discovered changed his entire understanding of construction and engineering. They don't build ships, he explained to Sarah during his first report. They grow them. The materials self-assemble at the molecular level according to programmed patterns. A ship that would take us 5 years to build can be completed in 5 days. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Webb, during his tactical briefings with Zephyrian military commanders, discovered something that shocked both species. Captain, Webb reported privately to Sarah, the Zephyrians have been fighting the swarm for over 1,000 years, but they've been fighting defensively. They retreat, establish new defensive lines, retreat again when those lines are broken. They've never mounted a significant offensive operation. Why not? Sarah asked. Because they're afraid of becoming like the swarm themselves. They're so focused on preserving life and knowledge that they've become paralyzed by the fear of causing destruction. They literally don't know how to fight a war to win. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The test on Kepler 442b hadn't just been about survival. It had been about finding a species willing to make the hard choices that survival sometimes required. The Zephyrians needed humans not just for their determination, but for their willingness to accept the moral complexity of warfare. The alliance was becoming more complex than anyone had imagined, but Sarah was beginning to understand why humanity might be the key to stopping the Void Swarm. They possessed something the Zephyrians had lost in their millions of years of civilization, the brutal pragmatism necessary to win at any cost. 3 weeks after first contact, Sarah stood in the command center of the newly constructed orbital station, watching Earth rise over the horizon of Kepler 442b. The Zephyrian communication array had finally established contact with home, and the response from Earth Command had been everything she expected and feared. Captain Chen, came the familiar voice of Admiral Harrison through the quantum communicator. Your situation report has caused quite a stir here. Half the government thinks this is the greatest opportunity in human history. The other half thinks you've all been brainwashed by aliens. Sarah smiled grimly. After 18 months of radio silence, she hadn't expected a warm welcome. Admiral, with respect, what we think matters less than what we can prove. The Zephyrians are sharing their star charts and threat assessments with Earth Command as we speak. The Void Swarm is real and it's coming. Through the station's observation deck, Sarah could see construction ships working around the clock. The orbital facility was expanding daily, with new sections being grown rather than built. Human and Zephyrian engineers worked side by side, creating something unprecedented in galactic history. Dr. Martinez joined Sarah at the observation window, carrying a datapad filled with medical reports. The preliminary health scans are remarkable, she said. The Zephyrian medical technology could eliminate 90% of human diseases within a generation. Cancer, genetic disorders, even aging could become manageable conditions. What's the catch? Sarah asked. She had learned that every gift from the Zephyrians came with responsibilities. They want to establish medical centers on every human world, full integration of their healing technology with our healthcare systems. Some people back on Earth are calling it an invasion by medical means. Sarah nodded. The political implications were staggering. Accepting Zephyrian technology would transform human society in ways that would make the Industrial Revolution look like a minor adjustment. The question was whether humanity was ready for such a transformation. Lieutenant Webb appeared in the command center, his expression troubled. "Captain, we need to discuss the military briefings. The situation is worse than the Zephyrians initially indicated." They moved to a secure conference room where Webb activated a holographic display showing the galactic map. The dark areas representing swarm consumption had spread noticeably since their first briefing. "The swarm isn't just consuming resources," Webb explained. "It's learning. Each system it devours adds to its collective intelligence. The Zephyrians showed me battle footage from their recent encounters. The swarm's tactics are evolving faster than their defensive strategies can adapt." The hologram shifted to show actual combat footage. Sarah watched in horror as massive mechanical entities stripped planets bare in a matter of days. Worse, the swarm units seemed to analyze and counter every defensive strategy almost instantly. "How many species have they consumed?" Sarah asked quietly. 47 confirmed civilizations in the past century alone," Webb replied. "The Zephyrians estimate another dozen species have gone dark but remain unconfirmed. We're looking at the systematic elimination of all organic intelligence in the galaxy." Dr. Martinez pulled up biological data on her pad. "I've been studying the swarm samples the Zephyrians provided. It's not just mechanical intelligence, it's corrupted organic intelligence. These things were once living beings, but they've been converted into something else entirely." The implications were chilling. The Void Swarm wasn't just destroying life, it was perverted life turned against itself. Sarah thought about her crew, about the bond they had forged through shared hardship. The idea of that bond being corrupted and weaponized was almost unbearable. "There's more," Webb continued. "The Zephyrians have been monitoring swarm movements for the past month. They're changing direction. Instead of continuing their systematic consumption pattern, they're heading directly toward human space." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "How is that possible? They shouldn't even know humans exist." "Quantum communication," Webb explained grimly. "Our first contact with the Zephyrians created a quantum signature that the swarm appears to have detected. They know something significant happened here, and they're coming to investigate." The timeline had just collapsed from 30 years to less than 5. The swarm was actively hunting them now, drawn by the very alliance that was supposed to save the galaxy. "Captain," came Keeper Valeth's mental voice as the alien leader materialized in the conference room. The Zephyrians' usual calm demeanor showed cracks of concern. "We have detected massive swarm movement toward this sector. We may have accelerated the timeline beyond acceptable parameters." Sarah stood to face the Keeper. "Are you saying our alliance has made things worse?" "In the short term, yes," Valeth admitted. "However, this development may also represent our greatest opportunity. The swarm is moving faster than usual, which means they're operating beyond their optimal efficiency parameters. They're responding emotionally rather than logically." Dr. Martinez looked up from her datapad with sudden understanding. "They're afraid. The swarm is afraid of what humans represent." Valeth's expression showed surprise and approval. "An astute observation, Doctor. Our analysis suggests the same conclusion. The swarm has encountered something in human nature that it cannot easily categorize or counter. What could possibly make a galactic-level intelligence afraid of one species?" Sarah asked. "Unpredictability," Webb answered before Valeth could respond. "Everything they've consumed so far has been logical, defensive, predictable. But humans don't follow logical patterns when threatened. We get creative, we take risks, we do things that make no sense from a strategic standpoint but somehow work anyway." Valeth nodded slowly. "The swarm's greatest strength is its ability to analyze and counter enemy tactics. But humans appear to operate on principles that resist analysis. Your species has a documented history of achieving victory through methods that should not work." Sarah thought about their survival on Kepler 442b, about the countless jury-rigged solutions and desperate gambles that had kept them alive. They had succeeded not because their plans were brilliant, but because they were willing to try anything when conventional wisdom failed. "So, what's the plan?" Sarah asked. "We obviously can't evacuate the entire galaxy before the swarm arrives." Valeth's response carried undertones of something Sarah had never heard from the ancient alien before. Hope mixed with desperate determination. "We make a stand here," Valeth said. "We turn Kepler 442b into the greatest fortress in galactic history, and we force the swarm to come to us on our terms. We combine Zephyrian technology with human tactical innovation to create a defense that cannot be analyzed or countered. Webb was already thinking tactically. What kind of resources are we talking about? Every ship, every weapon, every defensive system the Zephyrians have accumulated over 1,000 years of running from the swarm, Valeth replied. Plus manufacturing capabilities that can produce human-designed vessels and weapons at unprecedented scales. Dr. Martinez raised a crucial point. What about Earth? If we're making a stand here, what happens to the rest of humanity? Earth becomes our backup, Sarah said, the plan forming in her mind. If we fail here, at least humanity will have Zephyrian technology to improve their chances. But if we succeed, Valeth finished, we don't just save humanity or the Zephyrians. We save every species in the galaxy and prove that organic intelligence can triumph over mechanical perfection. The weight of responsibility was staggering, but Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since their first dark days on the planet. Absolute certainty. This was what they had been preparing for during those 18 months of isolation. Every challenge they had overcome, every impossible solution they had found, had been training for this moment. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Based on current swarm movements, approximately 18 months, Valeth replied. Sarah almost laughed at the irony. 18 months. Exactly the time they had spent learning to survive on this world. It felt like a sign that they were exactly where they needed to be, facing exactly the challenge they were meant to face. Then we better get started, she said. 6 months into the defense preparations, the Kepler 442b system had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the primary command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the massive construction effort taking place across the entire star system. Status report, Sarah called out as she surveyed the organized chaos around her. Lieutenant Webb, now bearing the rank of colonel thanks to his promotion by Earth Command, gestured to a tactical display. The asteroid belt has been completely converted into automated weapons platforms. We have over 10,000 defensive stations operational, with more coming online every day. The plan they had developed was ambitious, beyond anything either species had attempted before. Rather than building traditional defensive structures, they were creating an entire system-wide maze of overlapping fields of fire, mobile defense platforms, and trap systems designed to channel the swarm into kill zones. Dr. Martinez, now serving as Director of Xenobiology Research, approached with her latest report. The biological defense systems are exceeding expectations. The modified organisms are creating atmospheric pockets throughout the system that will interfere with swarm communications and navigation. The biological defenses had been Sarah's idea, inspired by their first discovery of terraforming organisms on the planet below. If the swarm was essentially corrupted organic intelligence, perhaps they could be confused or disrupted by specifically designed biological agents. What about the human reinforcements? Sarah asked. Webb's expression grew complex. Earth Command has approved the deployment of the entire Third Fleet, plus volunteer crews from 12 different nations. But Captain, they're not coming just to fight. They're coming to witness. Sarah understood the implications. Humanity was betting everything on this battle. If they failed here, Earth would at least have a complete record of how the Void Swarm operated, along with Zephyrian technology to improve their own defenses. Keeper Valeth materialized beside them, the aliens' form now showing signs of the stress they were all under. Even with their advanced technology, the Zephyrians were working at the absolute limits of their capabilities. The manufacturing complexes have completed the first batch of hybrid vessels, Valeth reported. Ships that combine our technology with human design principles. The results are unusual, Sarah smiled. Unusual had become the highest compliment in their joint operations. The hybrid ships didn't follow conventional design logic from either species, but they incorporated human concepts like redundancy, improvisation capability, and what engineers had started calling beneficial chaos, systems designed to work even when they shouldn't. Chief Engineer Rodriguez, now coordinating with Zephyrian technicians across multiple construction sites, joined the briefing. Captain, you need to see what we've built in the outer system. It's not what anyone expected, but it might be exactly what we need. They took a transport to the outer system, where the largest construction project was nearing completion. What Sarah saw defied easy description. Instead of a massive space station or fleet formation, they had built what looked like a three-dimensional maze spanning millions of cubic kilometers. "We call it the Labyrinth," Rodriguez explained with obvious pride. "It's based on ancient human military strategies combined with Zephyrian spatial manipulation technology. The swarm will find it almost impossible to navigate efficiently." The structure was beautiful in its complexity. Corridors and chambers twisted through space in patterns that followed no obvious logic, connected by passages that could shift and reconfigure in real time. Hidden throughout the maze were weapons platforms, shield generators, and surprise attack points. "How do we navigate it?" Sarah asked. "That's the genius part," Rodriguez replied. "We don't navigate it logically. Human crews will fly by instinct and training, using the same kind of improvisation that kept us alive on the planet. The Zephyrians provide real-time spatial mapping, but the actual tactics will be pure human chaos." Valeth added, "We have run countless simulations with our most advanced artificial intelligence systems. They cannot solve the labyrinth efficiently. It requires intuitive decision-making that mechanical intelligence appears to lack." As they toured the facility, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what they had created. This wasn't just a defensive system. It was a trap designed to exploit the fundamental weaknesses of mechanical intelligence. The swarm's greatest strength, its ability to analyze and counter threats, would become a liability in an environment designed to resist analysis. "What about casualties?" Sarah asked quietly. Webb's expression grew somber. "Projected losses are significant. We're talking about a battle unlike anything in recorded history. But the alternative is the extinction of all organic intelligence in the galaxy." Dr. Martinez had been studying swarm behavioral patterns and offered a different perspective. Based on their psychological profiles, the swarm might actually be more vulnerable than we initially thought. They've been consuming civilizations for so long that they may have forgotten how to adapt to truly unexpected resistance. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the primary command center. "All senior staff return immediately," came the voice of Communications Officer Park. "We have a priority message from Earth Command." Back in the command center, Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the main display. His expression was grave but determined. "Captain Chen, I'm transmitting new intelligence that changes our understanding of the swarm threat. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected something unprecedented." The display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the edge of human space. What they saw made everyone in the command center fall silent. "The swarm isn't just heading toward your position," Admiral Harrison continued. "They're bringing everything. Our analysis suggests they've abandoned their systematic consumption pattern and are committing their entire force to reaching Kepler 442b. Valeth's mental voice carried undertones of shock. "That represents the accumulated strength of 1,000 years of galactic conquest. Millions of ships, planet-sized command vessels, technology stolen from dozens of advanced civilizations." Sarah felt the weight of the entire galaxy settling on her shoulders. "How long until they arrive?" 8 weeks, Admiral Harrison replied. "But Captain, there's more. Long-range scans suggest the swarm has been modifying itself during transit. They're preparing specifically for this engagement." The implication was clear. The Void Swarm saw the human-Zephyrian alliance as an existential threat. They were abandoning their careful, methodical approach for an all-out assault designed to eliminate the threat permanently. "Sir," Sarah said formally, "we understand the situation. We'll be ready." After the transmission ended, the command center remained silent for several minutes. Finally, Webb spoke up with characteristic military directness. "They're scared," he said. "A galaxy-spanning intelligence doesn't abandon a 1,000-year strategy unless they're absolutely terrified of what we represent." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "Which means we have something they don't understand and can't counter. The question is whether we understand it ourselves." Sarah looked around at her team, the survivors who had refused to give up, the humans who had learned to thrive in impossible conditions, the aliens who had chosen to trust in an untested alliance. They had 8 weeks to prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of all organic life in the galaxy. "We know exactly what we have," Sarah said finally. "We have something the swarm has never encountered in 1,000 years of conquest. We have hope backed by the willingness to fight for it no matter the odds." Valeth's ancient eyes reflected something that might have been tears. In all our millions of years of existence, we had forgotten that hope could be a weapon. You have reminded us that the greatest threat to despair is not logic or technology, but the simple refusal to surrender. As they began final preparations for the greatest battle in galactic history, Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the same determination that had carried them through 18 months of isolation and hardship. They had survived abandonment, transformed defeat into victory, and built strength from desperation. Now they would discover if that was enough to save the galaxy. The Void Swarm arrived like a plague of mechanical locusts, blotting out the stars as they approached Kepler 442b. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the primary command center, watching the largest concentration of hostile forces in galactic history deploy across the outer system. "Final count?" she asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. Colonel Webb reviewed the tactical displays with the calm professionalism that had kept them alive during their darkest days. Over 2 million individual vessels ranging from fighter class to planet killers. The largest command ship is approximately the size of Earth's moon. The numbers were staggering, but Sarah had learned not to be intimidated by impossible odds. Around her, the command center hummed with activity as human and Zephyrian crews made final preparations. The alliance had grown stronger over the past 8 weeks, with both species learning to complement each other's strengths. "All human vessels report ready," Communications Officer Park announced. The Third Fleet had arrived from Earth along with volunteer crews from across human space. They brought with them something the Zephyrians had never seen before, crews willing to pilot ships they had no expectation of surviving. Dr. Martinez monitored the biological defense systems from her station. The atmospheric organisms are in position throughout the system. The moment the swarm enters our defensive perimeter, they'll find their communications and navigation systems severely degraded. Keeper Valeth stood beside Sarah, the ancient alien's mental presence radiating calm determination. "Our automated systems are online and coordinated with human tactical doctrine. This level of cooperation between our species would have been impossible even 6 months ago." Sarah nodded, thinking about how much both species had changed during their alliance. The Zephyrians had remembered how to fight offensively, while humans had gained access to technology that seemed miraculous. More importantly, they had learned to trust each other completely. "Incoming transmission," Park announced. "The swarm is attempting to communicate." The main display flickered and resolved into an image that made several crew members step backward involuntarily. The being on screen had once been organic, but mechanical components had replaced so much of its structure that its original species was unrecognizable. When it spoke, the voice carried the cold precision of artificial intelligence overlaid with hints of what might once have been individual personality. "Organic entities of the Kepler system," the swarm speaker began. "You possess technology and capabilities that exceed expected parameters for your developmental stage. Submit to incorporation, and your unique attributes will be preserved within the collective intelligence." Sarah stepped forward, drawing on all her experience as a leader to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, commanding the Allied forces of this system. We reject your offer and demand that you withdraw from this sector immediately." The swarm entity's expression shifted in a way that suggested amusement, though the mechanical augmentations made it difficult to read. "Captain Chen, we have analyzed your species extensively since detecting your alliance with the Zephyrian Archive. Humans represent an interesting evolutionary anomaly, high creativity paired with violent tendencies and resistance to logical decision-making." "Thank you," Sarah replied dryly. "We prefer to think of it as character. Your species' refusal to accept inevitable outcomes is noted, and will be corrected through incorporation," the entity continued. "However, we offer terms. Surrender the Zephyrian technology and submit to voluntary incorporation, and we will allow your homeworld to exist as a preserved specimen world." Colonel Webb moved to Sarah's side, his hand resting casually on his sidearm despite its uselessness against the swarm. "Counteroffer," he said. "Pack up your mechanical nightmare and find another galaxy to infest." "This one's taken." The swarm entity studied Webb with mechanical precision. Colonel Marcus Webb, former military officer, survivor of extended isolation, developer of hybrid tactical doctrine. Your psychological profile indicates emotional attachment to lost causes and suicidal bravery. These traits will be useful once incorporated. Sorry, Webb replied, but I'm already committed to a lost cause. It's called being human. The transmission ended abruptly, and Sarah knew their brief diplomatic phase was over. All stations prepare for assault. Execute Defensive Plan Alpha. The labyrinth came alive as the first wave of swarm vessels entered the outer system. Weapons platforms that had been hidden in asteroid debris revealed themselves, opening fire with a combination of human explosive ordnance and Zephyrian energy weapons. The result was devastation on a scale neither species had achieved independently, but the swarm adapted quickly. After losing the first wave of scouts, they began deploying countermeasures. Jamming fields disrupted Zephyrian targeting systems, while analytical algorithms started predicting human attack patterns. They're learning faster than projected, Dr. Martinez reported from her analysis station. The biological interference is slowing them down, but not enough. Sarah watched the tactical display as thousands of enemy vessels pushed deeper into their defensive perimeter. The swarm was accepting massive casualties to probe their defenses, gathering data for the main assault. Execute Plan Beta, Sarah ordered. All human vessels begin chaos protocols. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. Instead of following conventional tactical doctrine, human ships began operating according to principles that seemed to violate everything known about space combat. Fighters attacked battlecruisers head-on. Destroyers ignored their assigned targets to pursue seemingly random objectives, and capital ships broke formation to engage in close-quarters combat that should have been suicide. But it worked. The swarm's analytical systems couldn't predict actions that made no logical sense. Human pilots flying by intuition and desperation achieved kill ratios that should have been impossible. Keeper Valith coordinated the Zephyrian response with growing amazement. Your species continues to exceed all expectations. The swarm's tactical algorithms are failing because they cannot model behavior that appears randomly destructive, but achieves positive outcomes. The battle raged for 6 hours. Before the swarm withdrew to regroup, both sides had taken heavy casualties, but the Alliance had achieved something unprecedented. They had forced the Void Swarm to retreat from an engagement. In the brief lull, Sarah assessed their situation. Casualty report? 30% of human vessels damaged or destroyed, Webb reported grimly. Zephyrian losses are lower but still significant. However, swarm losses are estimated at over 60% of their assault force. Dr. Martinez looked up from her analysis with excitement barely contained. Captain, I'm seeing something remarkable in the combat data. The swarm entities that survived our attacks are showing signs of psychological trauma. Individual units are exhibiting behavior patterns that suggest fear, confusion, and loss of collective cohesion. The implications were staggering. For 1,000 years, the Void Swarm had been an unstoppable force because it operated as a perfect collective intelligence. But human unpredictability was introducing chaos into that collective, creating individual awareness and emotional responses that the system couldn't process. They're remembering what they used to be, Valith said with wonder in the alien's mental voice. The human approach to combat is reawakening suppressed organic memories and emotions in the incorporated beings. Sarah felt a surge of hope. They weren't just fighting. The swarm, they were potentially liberating the countless, organic beings that had been forcibly incorporated over the centuries. Incoming priority transmission. From the swarm command vessel, Park announced. This time, the entity that appeared on screen was different. The mechanical augmentations were more extensive, and the voice carried no trace of individual personality. This was the core intelligence of the swarm, speaking directly. Organic anomalies, it began. Your resistance has introduced unacceptable variables into our collective consciousness. Continued engagement risks systemic instability. Therefore, we will employ total sterilization protocols. The transmission ended, and long-range sensors immediately detected massive energy buildups throughout the swarm fleet. They were preparing weapons capable of destroying entire planets. They're going to sterilize the system, Webb said quietly. Everything. The planet, the orbital installations, all of us. Sarah looked around at her command crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that had carried them through 18 months of impossible survival. They had come too far to give up now, Signal all ships, she ordered. Execute final protocol. All vessels converge on the swarm command ship. We're going to end this the way humans always have, by taking the fight directly to the enemy's heart. As the Alliance fleet prepared for what would be the final assault, Sarah realized they had already won something more important than the battle. They had reminded the galaxy that hope, courage, and the refusal to surrender were more powerful than any technology. The final assault on the swarm command vessel began with what military historians would later call the most audacious tactical maneuver in galactic warfare. Captain Sarah Chen led the charge aboard the flagship Resilience, a hybrid vessel that perfectly embodied the alliance between human determination and Zephyrian technology. All ships follow my lead, Sarah broadcast as they plunged directly into the heart of the swarm formation. We're not retreating, we're not surrendering, and we're not stopping until every organic being in that collective is free. The massive swarm command vessel loomed ahead, its surface bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But Sarah had learned something during their 18 months of survival on Kepler 442b. Sometimes the most direct approach was the only one that worked. Colonel Webb coordinated the assault from the tactical station, his voice steady as death approached. Wave 1, focus on the defensive grid. Wave 2, target the communication arrays. Wave 3, we're going in. Dr. Martinez monitored her biological weapons from the science station, watching as specially designed organisms spread through the swarm's communication networks. The bioagents are working, she reported. Individual swarm units are starting to exhibit independent behavior patterns. Throughout the attacking fleet, similar scenes played out. Human crews pushed their ships beyond design limits, while Zephyrian technology provided the power and precision necessary to survive the impossible assault. But more importantly, their combined approach was having an effect neither species could have achieved alone. Keeper Valeth provided real-time strategic coordination while fighting alongside humans who had taught the ancient alien what it meant to refuse defeat. The collective intelligence is fragmenting, Valeth reported with growing excitement. Individual consciousness is re-emerging throughout the swarm network. The breakthrough came when a damaged swarm fighter broke formation and began attacking its own forces. Then another. Within minutes, entire squadrons of swarm vessels were turning against the collective that had enslaved them. My God, whispered Communications Officer Park. They're remembering who they used to be. The swarm command vessel responded by attempting to reassert control through direct neural override. But the chaos was spreading too quickly. 1,000 years of suppressed memories and emotions were flooding back into beings who had been forced to forget their individuality. Sarah pushed the Resilience through the swarm's defensive perimeter, taking damage that should have destroyed them but somehow holding together through a combination of human engineering redundancy and Zephyrian adaptive technology. Boarding parties prepare for final assault, Sarah ordered. We're going to take that command ship and shut down the collective intelligence permanently. The boarding action was unlike anything in recorded military history. Human Marines in powered armor fought alongside Zephyrian warrior scholars, battling through corridors filled with beings who were simultaneously enemies and victims. The goal wasn't just to destroy the swarm command structure. It was to liberate the organic minds trapped within the collective. Sarah led the assault team toward the central command chamber, where the core intelligence that had controlled the swarm for centuries waited. The final confrontation took place in a vast chamber filled with biotechnical interfaces that connected thousands of incorporated beings to the collective consciousness. The swarm's core intelligence appeared as a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical components, its voice carrying the combined anguish of every being it had consumed. You cannot comprehend what you are destroying, it said. We are perfection. We are the evolution beyond chaos and emotion and illogical hope. Sarah stepped forward, flanked by her crew and Zephyrian allies. You're wrong, she said firmly. You're not evolution, you're cancer. You're what happens when intelligence forgets that the struggle to survive and grow in hope is what makes life worth living. Dr. Martinez worked frantically at the biotechnical interfaces, using her understanding of both human and Zephyrian biology to reverse the incorporation process. I can free them, she called out. But I need time to unravel 1,000 years of forced integration. The core intelligence lashed out with weapons both physical and psychological, attempting to overwhelm the boarding party with the accumulated despair of every world it had consumed. But Sarah and her team had been through worse. They had survived abandonment, isolation, and the slow death of hope, and they had emerged stronger. Now, Sarah shouted, and her team executed a coordinated assault that combined human tactical innovation with Zephyrian technological precision. They didn't just attack the core intelligence. They attacked the very concept of forced unity that the swarm represented. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Throughout the command vessel and across the entire swarm fleet, incorporated beings began breaking free from collective control. Species that had been consumed centuries ago suddenly remembered their own names, their own cultures, their own capacity for independent thought and feeling. The core intelligence's final words carried a note of something that might have been relief. I remember what we were before the hunger took us. Thank you for reminding us that survival without hope is not survival at all. As the swarm collective collapsed, Sarah watched thousands of liberated beings take control of their vessels and begin the long process of rediscovering their individual identities. Some would choose to remain in space, forming new alliances and federations. Others would seek to rebuild their homeworlds or find new places to call home. Status report, Sarah called out as they secured the command vessel. The swarm fleet is standing down, Webb reported with obvious amazement. They're not destroyed. They're liberated. We've got representatives from dozens of species requesting communication and assistance. Dr. Martinez looked up from her work with tears streaming down her face. Sarah, we didn't just win a battle. We saved an entire galaxy's worth of civilizations that were thought lost forever. Keeper Valeth's mental voice carried undertones of profound gratitude and respect. Captain Chen, your species has accomplished something that my people considered impossible. You have proven that hope and determination can triumph over any form of oppression. In the weeks that followed, as the liberated species began to organize themselves and plan for reconstruction, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. It had started with apparent abandonment on a remote mining world, continued through 18 months of survival against impossible odds, and culminated in the greatest rescue operation in galactic history. Did you ever imagine it would end like this? Webb asked as they stood in the observation deck of the rebuilt orbital station, watching representatives from hundreds of species working together to plan their futures. Sarah smiled, thinking about the scared and desperate crew that had first arrived on Kepler 442b. No, she said. But that's what makes us human, isn't it? We never know when we're going to surprise ourselves. Dr. Martinez joined them, carrying reports from the ongoing liberation efforts. The final count is extraordinary. We've freed over 12 million sentient beings from swarm control, representing 47 different species. Most of them want to establish embassies here, on the world where the liberation began. Ebru. Valeth materialized beside them, the ancient alien's presence now carrying an energy and purpose that had been missing for millennia. The Zephyrian people have voted unanimously to relocate our primary archives to this system. We wish to study and learn from the human approach to impossible challenges. As Sarah looked out at the bustling activity in the system that had once been their prison, she realized they had found something more valuable than rescue. They had found their purpose as a species, not just to survive, but to inspire hope in others facing their own impossible challenges. The galaxy was vast and full of new threats and opportunities, but Sarah was no longer worried about humanity's place in it. They had proven that being abandoned didn't mean being forgotten, that isolation could breed strength instead of despair, and that the willingness to fight for others was the highest expression of what it meant to be human. Earth Command had already approved the establishment of a permanent human presence in the Kepler 442b system, which was being renamed as Beacon, a place where any species facing extinction or oppression could come for assistance and alliance. So what's next, Captain? Park asked as she joined the group on the observation deck. Sarah looked around at her crew, her family, The people who had turned abandonment into triumph and defeat into the greatest victory in galactic history. Next, we do what humans have always done, she said. We explore, we grow, we help others, and we never stop believing that tomorrow can be better than today. As the first of the liberated species ships departed to begin their journeys home, Sarah knew that the human story in the galaxy was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy not through conquest or domination, but through their refusal to let hope die in the face of overwhelming odds. The sky above Kepler 442b was no longer empty. It was filled with the ships of dozens of species, all working together to build a future that none of them could have achieved.